such an immensity of water. I waited for Riho to elaborate, but she remained silent. Her short human female form was tense as the clearly transfixed alien slowly scanned the expansive ocean surrounding us. We were currently standing at the outer railing of a secluded hilltop gazebo on the westernmost end of my island. The view from this high perch presented a sweeping panorama which extended from the southeast all the way around to the northeast. It was 18:20 in the evening, 15 minutes before local sunset. The Hemru had been downloaded into a fresh human standard shell earlier in the day and had arrived on my island via wormhole just half an hour ago. Like most recent transits, the portal terminus location had been the main aircraft landing pad near my workshop. Omu and I had been the only ones waiting for the alien, as news of the ambassador's arrival had not yet been disseminated to the island's other guests. As the island's manager, Serenity had known, of course, as had her young assistant Cassius. I'd also informed Sova Deduche as a courtesy, mainly because she'd been sleeping with me at the time I'd been notified of the alien's revised schedule. The tall construction worker would be heading back to Vistas soon, but had expressed an interest in meeting the alien before she left. I'd asked the three to be patient and let Omu and I handle the welcome, as I had wanted to avoid possibly overwhelming the Hemru. Omu had revealed to me before the ambassador's arrival that the Hemru was struggling with its new physical form. Despite having lived in a human-like body for weeks in accelerated virtual, reality was proving more difficult. Things as simple as walking upright were taxing to the Hemru. Its mental structures had evolved around controlling 8 limbs in an almost prone stance, and now, in a shell possessing only 4, it lacked practice interpreting the human balance systems used to walk upright properly on only 2. Fortunately, technology was able to compensate to some extent. Using the shell's advanced cranial implants, a partial presence of Xenius AI was acting as Riho's augment. This allowed the Hemru to bypass the extensive physical therapy normally needed to properly integrate such drastic changes. A side benefit was that the AI also acted as a powerful internal conceptual translator. Omu also warned me that the alien's humanoid female shell was more compact than standard. When I first saw its arrival, I estimated its height at just over 130 centimeters tall, or only 10 centimeters taller than Omu had originally been, before my companion rebuilt herself to be taller. Thankfully, and somewhat disturbingly, the compact female shell was formed as a fully developed, mature woman and not as an adolescent. Not looking like an 8-year-old kid, despite the shell's shortness, would help remind others, and me, that we were dealing with an adult alien. We'd learned in virtual that Riho's physical age when her mind recording had been embedded into the Hemru probe had been about half a century. This was considered relatively young by her species' reckoning, as they had had access to life-prolonging medical treatments for far longer than humans. After Riho had been deposited on heels, and after the alien had recovered from its first experience using wormhole transport, Omu and I had begun to show it around. We had started at my nearby workshop where I'd had to explain my current love of wood carving. I was happy to learn that the Hemru understood recreational crafting and similar art, although it said her species preferred sculpting in stone. I also used the main viewer in my workshop office to show the alien some of my old drawings and paintings. She was able to more closely relate to these forms of artistic creation, as her species also practiced rendering on images and impressions on various forms of media. As our tour left the workshop area, I quickly noticed that the Hemru was distracted by the island's 2 nearby beach areas. I'd recalled that it had commented during our earlier virtual meeting about the Earth being cooler and wetter than it was used to. It dawned on me that large bodies of water like our oceans might be a novelty to the alien. When I suggested that we delay the tour of the island's facilities and structures and instead go look at the ocean, the Hemru had responded eagerly. Due to the lateness of the day, I decided to postpone visiting the busy beach area itself and instead seek out a higher vantage from which to observe the pending sunset. The island's tallest promontory was less than a kilometer away, so off we went. We stuck to the paved interior trail as I had wanted both an easy hike and to preserve the grand reveal of the surrounding ocean for as long as possible. As we walked, Ambassador Riho was commenting on the passing plant and animal life. Thankfully, Omu fielded the burden of answering the Hemru's many questions. The Hemru was moving well in its new shell, although we were proceeding slowly. It was apparent from the many slight hesitations that the AI augment was compensating where the alien's mental control was lacking. Its gait was also noticeably unnatural, a fact that could have been attributed to either the alien or the AI. It also moved its head and neck strangely as it observed its surroundings. Omu had also warned me about this before the Hemru had arrived. She had speculated that it was a byproduct of the Hemru mentality trying to function within the limits of the human shell's binocular vision. Where previously having 8 eye stalks facing in all directions, having just 2 non-independent eyes must have been like being partially blindfolded. Again, Xenius AI, via the implant, was helping the Hemru compensate. It was also strange and amusing to watch the alien stop and smell many of the items she was discussing with Omu. I finally broke down and asked the android sub vocally what was going on. The ambassador is new to the human sensation of smell, John. The Hemru's original form has one combined sensation of taste and smell, and she is unused to having 2 completely separate methods and is enjoying the novelty. 20 minutes later, we'd arrived at the hilltop contemplation gazebo. I'd laughed at the Hemru's sudden display of emotions at the sight of so much water. I was able to read its responses clearly in sequence, which ranged from an initial look of fear being quickly replaced by awe and then curiosity. Yes, the ocean can be overwhelming at first sight, I finally replied. I remember the awe I felt when I first saw it. Tomorrow we will take you swimming in the North Lagoon. You frolic in the water? Riho asked, amazement clearly showing on her petite face. I chuckled at her expression. Of course. It is said that humans evolved to be semi-aquatic. I gestured down towards her shell. As expected, though diminutive, it was still toned and physically fit. Despite that, her skin had yet to build any decent tolerance to the sun. As a result, she was currently wearing a light caftan and a pair of traction socks. Our relative lack of body hair, combined with our long limbs and the natural buoyancy of our bodies, all point to an evolved ability to tolerate and function decently in the water. I gestured higher to her face. Also, the shape of our nose may have evolved to allow us to breathe while swimming. Humans can swim quite fast compared to other land mammals. Riho shuddered slightly but did not immediately dismiss the notion. Of course, we'll work with you to help you learn how to swim, I said to ease her fears. I had to applaud her willingness to learn as much as she could about human beings and our way of life. Her reaction also gave me a new insight. Is our form as terrifying to you as the Hemru true form is to us on us to wing to war? That's why I asked. Riho considered the question for a long moment before responding. I must admit to some feelings of revulsion. Those feelings are diminishing with time, however. I pondered that and refrained from further questions on the subject. The Hemru also remained silent and simply focused on the setting sun. The waves to the west were sparkling, and the skies reddening as the orb of the sun kissed the horizon. Finally, after the distorted luminous body disappeared fully from view, Riho turned to me. I have never seen, nor have I imagined, such a sight. Thank you, John, for bringing me to this place and time to witness it firsthand. You are welcome, I simply replied. Being near the equator meant that full darkness came rapidly. I saw 2 headlights start off from the garage compound and track down the path leading towards this gazebo. Naomi or Omu must have dispatched a pair of automated carts to convey us more quickly back to the island's dwelling area. The Hemru continued, I am surprised to be here, John. What do you mean? I asked. When I consented to allow my mental image to be taken, it was for selection purposes only, as I was just one of many who offered themselves for consideration to be inserted into the memory archives of our probe being sent to your world. To be here now meant that of all the candidate minds, my contribution was chosen. That's a good thing, though. You should be proud, right? I admit that I did not expect the probe would succeed, or at least that if it did reach your world, that it would be intercepted and any mind images included in its memories revived. I could understand that. I'd felt the same way upon being revived. Most notably back when I'd been revived as a woman and learned that I was just a copy and that my real body was still suspended somewhere else. Why do you think you were selected? I asked. I suspect that it was a combination of being skilled at diplomacy and alien societal extrapolation, combined with a general lack of detailed knowledge of our critical technologies. Riho replied quietly. I immediately thought of some of the politicians or celebrities of my past, although the comparisons were probably not fair to the Hemru. I knew about protecting one's technology. Hell, the picket package that had been transmitted to the Earth had been sanitized to protect assemblage secrets. It was only logical that the Hemru acted in a similar fashion when selecting who and what to send along with their probe. Well, I have only just begun to know you, but I already think you are a fine emissary, I offered. Riho remained silent. I wasn't sure what she was thinking, so I continued. You must have had some hope that we would be able to intercept the probe. Yes, my mind image was included against just that unlikely occurrence. I must say our estimation that your world would prevail against the enemy and remain in a position to do so was very, very low. I simply nodded. I was often amazed that we were still here also. The fading daylight caused the illuminated floor markings and path lights to come on. The alien ambassador took note of the illuminated scrollwork now marking each of the 6 pillars supporting the gazebo's roof. LD, she slowly enunciated. What does this designation mean? My daughter's initials, I replied. I went on to explain that my 5th daughter, Larissa Daring, had grown up on the island. I'd had this gazebo constructed as a special place just for her. I smiled as I traced the illuminated letters. I'd forgotten that she'd marked the structure as her own, or had I simply not ever been up here after dark? I'd have to ask her the next time she visited. The thought reminded me that I needed to give her and her sister Charity a call, as it had been a while since I had last seen them both. We were interrupted by the arrival of the automated carts. After the pair awkwardly managed to reverse themselves on the narrow trail, I waited while Omu assisted the unsteady alien into the lead car. The android climbed in with her, while I took the second. As we proceeded back down the path, I was able to overhear them conversing almost non-stop. I noted that the Hemru interacted with the android differently than most humans did. More like someone interacting with an appliance. Maybe interactions with the Hemru AIs were different. As we passed my workshop, I saw that there was already a bonfire burning at the North Beach gathering area. Tonight was New Year's Eve, and Serenity had planned one hell of a party. I'd already explained the party's details to Riho and extended an invitation if she wanted to attend. I was relieved when she indicated her preference to observe such a gathering from a distance. Still, we planned to attend early on, as the island's guests were expecting to meet the alien. After a quick meet and greet, and before the commencement of feasting and imbibing, we planned to make our escape and return to my lodge in its more intimate surroundings. There, we could observe the party from the safety of my rooftop balcony. What the alien would make of naked humans dancing and singing around a fire, I could only guess. Will you miss me? Sova asked as we lay in my bed enjoying a post-coital cuddle. We'd enjoyed an extended morning of recreational frolicking as she was departing to return to duty on Vesta later this evening. I didn't need my nearly 2 centuries of experience in dealing with the opposite sex to know that any answer other than, "Of course I will miss you," would have been a mistake. She smiled when I replied just so. In truth, I would miss her. She was easy to talk to, especially considering her youth. She also clearly knew the boundaries of our relationship. In that, it was clear that I was just a fling for her, and that fling was nearing its end date. Still, she treated her flings with a vigorous passion that had me smiling just remembering it. Omu entered my bedchamber bearing a tray with cups and a carafe of coffee. "Good morning, Sova." "Good morning, John. I have coffee." "Sova, your great-grandmother's aircraft will be landing in 22 minutes. "Thanks, Omu," she said, hopping out of bed and bounding to the bathroom. I remained but did pull myself up into a sitting position to receive the coffee Omu was pouring for me. I heard the rainfall shower turn on in the bathroom. Sova was taking advantage of the normal gravity to indulge in my abundant hot water. "John, although they wish it to be a surprise, Hannah is bringing Alec with her. I estimate you would wish to know beforehand." "Thank you, Omu," I said as I sipped the perfectly prepared brew. Rather than upsetting me, I was glad to learn that my son was visiting. That he was coming with Hannah indicated that the pair were still mutually pursuing their goal of being personally involved with the pending attack against the enemy. How did Ambassador Riho fare last night? I caught Omu's illuminated smirk before the android answered. She spent the night with Cassius in his quarters. It appears that her desire to better understand human mating techniques was at least partially fruitful. Do you want the details? Not only no, but hell no, I blurted. I'd had to draw the line last evening. Riho had stated that she wished to join Sova and me in my bedroom simply as an observer to study the human phenomena of purely recreational pseudo-procreation. I'd declined, of course, invoking my personal requirements for privacy. I'd been somewhat exasperated and had absent-mindedly recommended that the Hemru seek out Serenity or Cassius in order to learn such details. Apparently, shit. Oh, moo! Was Serenity with them? I asked, unable to stem my curiosity. No, your great-granddaughter spent the night in her own quarters. Good. No, wait. I knew Serenity and Cassius had been spending some evenings together. Would my great-granddaughter be jealous of Cassius and the alien? Did she know that Cassius and Riho, Yes, it was your great-granddaughter who recommended to the Hemru ambassador that experiencing the actual act would be far better than simply observing. While the word Odair was never uttered, she basically dared the alien to sleep with the young man. That sounded like something Serenity would do. I bet she thought it would be a humorous prank to play on the young man. Again, curiosity got the better of me. How did the alien react? Is Cassius all right? There are recordings. I can edit out the awkward attempts at foreplay. No, that's fine. I just want to know if either of them is traumatized or injured. Maybe the alien mated like a female mantis or spider, or maybe something equally disturbing like a digger wasp injecting its eggs into a prey animal. Omu's face was now illuminated with an expression of mirth. I believe both achieved their mutually desired outcomes, John. Cassius reacted much as all young men would. I suspect that having only recently gone through sexuality training and practice classes made him a suitably understanding teacher to one new to the process. The Hemru seemed to react somewhat clinically, at least at first. Later, the increasing physical sensations undoubtedly felt by the ambassador's fully functional human shell caused the alien to, "Okay, I get it," I interrupted. I wasn't sure why I was reacting so prudishly about the subject. They were both adults after all, and their shells had full fertility blocks in place. And Riho had an AI augment guiding her every ugh. I had to get the topic off my mind. "I'm hungry," I blurted, mostly to change the subject. "Breakfast is being prepared as we speak. Hannah and Alec have not recently eaten, and it was decided that the 6 of you could share a combined meal upon their arrival," Omu stated. 6? Yes. Cassius and Riho have also just awakened and will be joining the group. Having already broken her fast, Serenity is currently elsewhere, seeing to the needs of the island's guests. I chugged the rest of my coffee and hopped out of bed. Sova was still showering when I finished relieving myself, but I chose the separate sonic cleansing chamber to allow us to finish faster. I'm sure our guests would not appreciate waiting while we dallied in the shower together longer than necessary. Besides, I was truly hungry, and my stomach currently had the upper hand. Mid-morning found Alec and me relaxing under the sunshade of my workshop patio. It was nearly a perfect day, calm and warm with plenty of sun. Omu had served us both iced tea and then had gone off to the North Beach area to assist Cassius as they taught the Hemru ambassador to swim and snorkel. Hannah's dog Misty was keeping near Omu. The augmented pet had arrived with her and was enjoying both the unlimited water and the attention from the numerous new humans on the beach. I'd made no rules regarding pets being on heels, so his presence was not taboo. These days, most companion animals were augmented to some extent, which ensured that they remained under control. No worries about guests being bitten or animals crapping where they weren't allowed. In fact, pets were far less of a bother than their masters. I smiled as I considered a pet-only island. With the good weather, the northern beach area was full of activity. The majority of the island's guests were in attendance, sunning themselves or playing in the water while trying to be circumspect about gawking at the alien in their midst. Nearby, in the outdoor sports area, Hannah and her descendant Sova were playing a round of vector ball. The game resembled tennis except that the ball was speed limited and trajectory fixed by technology. It reminded me somewhat of wiffle ball with the ball's slower movements, but the lack of dips and curving flight made it more like 3D Pong. Those facts, and also that the game was played on a paved square without nets, made the game unique. The players' movements were limited by the same magnetics which guided and suspended the ball. The technology acted on their ability to accelerate and decelerate via ankle and wristbands. Add in that the dampening effect on the players was tied to the velocity of the ball, made the game extremely challenging to master. I was solidly a novice. "I forgot how tranquil this place is," Alec said. "You're welcome here anytime, son. You know that. I'm still surprised you now allow guests. Heaven forbid you allow strangers to intrude on your solitary domain." "I'm not that antisocial," I argued. He just stared at me. "Well, maybe I was, a little," I admitted, "but I'm trying to turn over a new leaf. I think spending nearly a decade alone wandering around Mongolia and northern China changed me." I recalled my recent meeting with Jonathan. We shared the same mental foundations, and he'd managed to maintain a life of solitude many times longer than I had. I guess antisocial tendencies were part of who we were. We remained silent for a moment, simply watching the activity at the beach area and on the vector ball court. I took the opportunity to covertly study my son. As always, he was very reserved, the epitome of in control. His current shell was older than mine, probably in its 40s. It was likely the same one he'd been downloaded into after the Vexatus had left, after I'd gone against his wishes and had him reshelled here on Earth. Despite his shell's age, he looked to have kept it in peak physical condition. Under his nearly hairless bronze skin was a lean but strong body, corded with well-defined musculature. I was surprised that he no longer went completely bald. Instead, he now sported a shoulder-length queue that covered the small cranial data ports he'd had installed. Like his mother, Alec modified his shells to allow for direct physical interface with our digital partners. Unlike Ux's extensive brain alterations and enhancement modifications, Alec's interface ports were basic, just simply physical backups to the standard wireless neural webs most shells had, including mine. It was a combat precaution, a direct interface in case the wireless systems were jammed by some future foe. But despite their simple role, the visible physical alterations on his shell reminded me of his mother, and I frowned, recalling the last time I had seen her in deep interface. Alec had noticed. "What is it, Dad?" "I was just thinking about your mother. She has given so much for our cause and for her work." Alec said nothing at first, but I noticed that he now had a slight frown of his own. I felt bad for spoiling the mood. "So what do you think of your sister falling in love with the enemy?" I asked. That made Alec smile. "Pickett is no more the enemy than any random human. The compressed mind data which was sent to Earth was barely sentient. Along with not including any information threatening to the assemblage, they skipped sending anything that would really make him a threat to humans." "You don't think there is anything to worry about hidden deep in his psyche?" I asked. "No, I've spent hours in virtual with him. I've also gone over the deep analysis compiled by the AIs of his total mind data. They have found nothing threatening to us or our cause, even buried partial fragments. As he exists now, he is probably more human than some who exist on the fringes of normalcy." His last statement made me think of Jonathan again. I didn't consider myself extreme, but his actions were certainly on the fringe. Was Pickett more human than I was? I'd have to explore that further at some point in the near future. I was relieved Alec's summary of Pickett matched what I'd been able to discover on my own. I was happy for Kayla and glad that someone had finally motivated her to live a bit more in the real world. I knew that she still spent a great deal of her existence in virtual, but it was now less than it had been, and that was a change for the better as far as I was concerned. I hoped they stayed happy together, and that their disengagement from a completely virtual existence continued. "They are coming here in 10 days and are planning to stay for over a week, even with my island's low bandwidth," I confided, adding a bit of snark at the end. I considered the bandwidth on my island just fine. Alec raised his eyes at that and nodded. The news had surprised and pleased him. We were interrupted from further thoughts about his sister by Misty running toward us. "Bark! Bark! Bark! Bark!" "Hi, Alec. Hi, John." Alec leaned forward to pet Misty vigorously, dislodging the dried sand which caked the dog's back. "You having fun, fella? Like the water in the beach? Bark, bark, woof. Strange smelling water fun. Omu says, come swim. I laughed. Omu could have messaged me that easily enough. I knew sending the dog on an errand was her attempt to keep the dog busy and distracted. I caught Misty's heavy panting and realized that Omu might have had an ulterior motive. We'll head to the beach in a bit, Misty. Would you like a drink of cool, normal-smelling water? Woof! No translation was needed for that. I got up and filled a pan with cold water from the workshop's kitchenette. While Misty tanked up, I returned to the shaded patio and saw that Hannah and Sova had finished their game of vector ball. They stripped off their game gear along with shoes, sports bras, elbow, and knee pads, and tossed the items in a hamper before heading to the lagoon to cool off. Both Alec and I smiled as we admired the naked pair retreating down the trail. Were those wiggles for us? Sova's really tall. How is she handling Earth gravity full-time? Alec asked. She is doing well. She still gets tired now and then, but nothing like she did when she first arrived. Hopefully, we will soon have enough wormhole facilities and free energy to allow the spacers and other low-G workers more opportunities to return for higher gravity vacations. That would be healthier for them, he agreed. I am still trying to wrap my head around all the changes wormhole technology is bringing about. Mom sure outdid herself, didn't she? I nodded my agreement. I was just as proud of Oaks as our son was. Thinking of his mother reminded me of our talk about Alec's involvement in the upcoming assemblage offensive. Despite Naomi and Praxia not requesting the direct involvement of humans yet, Ux thought that we should plan around the possibility. Maybe Alec knew more than I did? With my dealings with the Hemru, I've not kept up with the war effort for the past few weeks. Have there been any new developments regarding your and to Ortreikers Akotu? Hannah's plans for direct combat? I probed carefully. Not really. Nothing certain can be planned until we scout the assemblage arc. The first scouting mission is still at least half a year away. The AIs want the backup facility on Vesta fully operational before we send any probes to the arc using the main array on Phobos. I remembered the preliminary plans for the first scouting mission. We plan to use wormholes to seed the trajectory ahead of the arc's ship with passive sensor platforms. The stealthy probes would be sent through with spatial velocities of around 7% of light speed. This was about 0.5% slower than the speed of the enemy arc, so the chances of our probes being spotted were minuscule. And even if one was spotted, the speed difference was such that there was virtually no chance of an interception or capture. Once the scout probes were on station, they would look for the radiation scattering from the boundary shock region of the nose of the enemy arc. Its speed was high enough that interstellar dust collisions would ionize and deflect high-energy particles, which we'd be able to detect. The sensors would also look for any emissions, or after it passes, any heat leakage from the enemy vessel directly. Once we detected the assemblage craft, we'd be able to refine its course and speed to a very high precision, which should allow follow-on missions to be targeted much nearer the enemy vessel. Our goal was to eventually be able to form a stationary wormhole directly on the surface of the alien vessel. Doing so from well over 8 light-years away seemed like a miracle, but the AIs were optimistic we could pull it off. The target scouting and course refinement would likely take months. We could shorten the time required only by increasing the risk of detection. I was strongly on board with the proceed with caution plan, and the overall delay was meaningless as long as we preserved the element of surprise. The enemy was still over 8 light-years from the Earth, and we had over a century until the Ark's passage after all. Misty had finished his drink and had run back to the beach, catching up with Sova and Hannah just as they arrived. The two humans waded into the water while Misty splashed ahead, swimming after a float toy thrown by Omu. Out in the lagoon proper, Cassius and Ambassador Riho were treading water while hanging onto a floating lounger. They seemed to be in the middle of an animated discussion. I hoped it was simply normal questions by the alien and not some sort of argument. As neither looked upset, I decided to let them sort it out themselves. The AIs would let me know if there was anything I needed to worry about. Praxia has brought me up to speed on the weapons research you've been supervising for the past year, Alec said, bringing my attention back to our discussion. Yes, it's been a busy time. What do you think? I asked. I'm impressed at the level of miniaturization you've achieved regarding the control hardware for the antimatter warheads. I don't know if I'd want to be anywhere near them when they are fully armed, But the test results say that they are relatively safe, he said. I feel the same. My biggest fear is that if we use them, one will go off prematurely and take out our wormhole generator. I'm hoping the passive kinetic impactors will be successful enough that we do not have to resort to using antimatter bombs at all. Do you really think we can hit the enemy arc with tungsten rods with any sort of precision? He asked. I shrugged. That's the big question. The AIs say that the guidance units can do the job. In theory, we will need to run tests. Many tests. In a few weeks, I will be heading back to Luna, far side, to oversee the first of these. What kind of tests are needed? Alec probed. We are going to use the Phobos wormhole generator to launch an inflatable target drone up to arc speed or about 7.5% of light speed. The drone's trajectory will be such that it passes near Earth orbit close enough to allow the short-ranged wormhole apparatus on Luna to set kinetic impactors into its path. I paused to enjoy the last swallow of my iced tea before continuing. If all goes well, the new guidance packages will steer the impactors into the oncoming drone within view of our orbital telescopes. The drone will also be transmitting its sensor data, so we will be able to see what our penetrator attack looks like from the enemy's perspective. Remember, we have to actively guide the impactors only at the last second, so the enemy has minimal time to react. Ideally, the intercept will happen without the enemy even knowing that the impactors are incoming, although it is likely that it has deployed a collision avoidance sensor net looking for objects in its path. Like the deflector dish on that old space show from your time? Alec said. I smiled, remembering that Kayla and Alec had loved watching my old science fiction television shows from before the reset. Star Trek had been one of our favorites. Yep, just like that. Dad, Praxia mentioned that there was another attack option in the works, but it refused to go into any detail. It did mention a name, something called Project Acid Rain. The AI said that I was not cleared to know full details about the project at this time, and that those instructions originated from you and Mother. With our attack still almost a year away, I hated to spread details of Acid Rain because it would be so controversial. But I also trusted Alec. Naomi, please make available to Alec the full details of Acid Rain, I said subvocally. Of course, John. A virtual presentation has already been prepared. Transmitting data now, Naomi replied via my implant. Alec sat up slightly as he received the data transmission into his own implant. His eyes lost focus as he entered partial virtuality to view the presentation. It would probably be an accelerated data dump and wouldn't take long. I took advantage of the lull to use the toilet in my workshop's bathroom. When I returned, Omu was waiting next to Alec on the patio. The pair were quiet, but Alec was focused on the android, indicating that they were communicating via implant. He turned to me as I retook my seat. Wow, acid rain. And here I was worried about those sketchy contraterrene bombs you'd built. I don't quite know what to think, Dad. Yes, well, that's why I am keeping details of acid rain secret for now. It may not be needed at all, or it might end up being our only chance. Hopefully, when the initial scouting missions are complete, we will have a better idea of if the project will be needed. But still, Alec said before pausing for a long moment, Dad, you do realize that there is a good chance we will lose Vesta if we use acid rain? I nodded. At least a portion of it, yes. I've already set plans in motion. The asteroid is being hardened against a possible loss of containment, and the human population will be reduced to a bare minimum if it becomes likely that the project will go forward. He still looked worried. I put my hand on his shoulder. How do you plan to deploy it against the enemy? He asked next. We are still working on that. Praxia and Naomi have run hundreds of thousands of simulations of various attacks on the enemy. If it turns out that acid rain is needed, it will be because our other weapons prove insufficient to destroy the enemy arc. If that is the case, misdirection and guile will certainly be needed. At his troubled look, I continued. Alec, we've still got a lot to work out, and in the meantime, please keep the details of the project to yourself. The AIs know, of course, and if you must talk it over with someone, talk to your mother. As with most things, she knows more about it than I do. There are a few other humans who know major parts of the plan, but not the complete details. We are keeping the full details closely held for now. He sighed and nodded. But now that you know the basics, you should probably begin working with Praxia to integrate the ramifications of the project into your training, I added. What do you mean? Alec asked. If we do need to use acid rain, electromagnetic pulse weaponry and shielding will certainly be a key part of any human follow-up assault. Alec considered that for a moment and nodded again. I see what you mean. If we do use it, we'll probably need a non-digital way of verifying its results, he speculated. Yes, it will be less likely for a lingering emergent to compromise a biological neural system. You'd have to have your implants fully isolated or even physically removed before such a mission, I added. Alec looked deep in thought. Soon he started nodding again. The enemy Orc ship will likely have a distributed digital network. Who knows how many secure backups or isolated areas we would need to flush out? Even if a digital attack was a complete success, we would still need to ensure that any contamination or after effects from acid rain were eradicated. Exactly, I replied. The vessel will still pass relatively close by the Earth in just over a century. We don't want to end up bringing any viable crud back. We sat in silence, Alec thinking, while I watched the action on the nearby beach. Cassius and Riho left the water and began strolling along the beach. The alien ambassador was certainly not shy as she stopped to chat for a moment with various groups of guests. While she did, Cassius stood nearby with the impatient and bored look of the young. I'd have to speak to him about that, as he'd do well to learn from the more patient alien. Alec finished his deep contemplations and also noticed the actions of the Hemru. How are you getting on with your alien guest? Better than I expected, I admitted. The AIs are handling most of Riho's almost non-stop questions. Thankfully, the ambassador is also quite reserved and patient with me. It has made no complaints or had any emotional outbursts, and has, well, blended in almost like any other human guest would. Maybe even better. It's hard to imagine that little human female shell actually holds the mentality of a giant alien bug, Alec said. I looked at him sharply. I don't mean that offensively, he said, holding up his hands. What I meant is that it must be a shock to her as much as it is to us. Yeah, I understand, I replied, sighing as I did. I also know what you didn't mean. I felt plenty of fear and revulsion when the Hemru revealed its true form to me in virtual. We watched Riho and Cassius move to another group of guests. These stood up to greet the alien respectfully. Riho looked like a kid talking to a group of grown-ups. Where did they find such a tiny human shell? Alec asked. The AIs didn't have time to grow that pint-sized shell from scratch, did they? I had no clue, and looked to Omu. The diminutive shell was obtained from a specialty novelty shop in old Europe, the android explained. It was leased on an open-ended term and flown to the North America SRP download facility a week ago, where it underwent various nano-based medical procedures to modify it for use by the Hemru. There is a company that inventories shells like that? I asked, amazed. Yes, along with diminutive models such as the ambassador is using, they have giant-sized models as well. They also offer a variety of chimeras. I hear the cheetah-human derivatives are quite popular, along with the mermen. Mermen? As in the breathing underwater, fast-swimming mermen and mermaids? I'd had no idea such a thing existed and said as much to Omu. Yes, it is a growing phenomenon, although due to the oxygen demands, the aquatic tailored shells cannot truly breathe underwater and can only remain submerged for around 9 minutes at any one time. Of course, if there was a market, someone would seek to capitalize. I wondered how long it would be before vacationers temporarily shelled as mermaids or mermen before coming to heels. I could see the lure of swimming and diving without breathing apparatus. I'd have to tell Serenity to investigate the subject with the goal of possibly offering specialized accommodations. Hell, maybe we could do a package deal with a specialty firm and store some shells here? Omu continued. The leasing agency was happy to supply the specialized shell for the aliens' use gratis. The company expects the notoriety to foster future demand for similar products. Speaking of Serenity, she chose that moment to walk up. How are my favorite great-grandpa and granduncle doing? Just fine, Serenity, Alec replied. I love it here. You've done a great job. I smiled as my son heaped praise onto his niece. I did not mind in the slightest that it was focused on Serenity, as it was certainly true that this place had seen great improvements under her management. She went to the workshop's garment fitter area and disrobed, pitching her work coveralls and undergarments into the recycler. She returned with a handful of beach towels. "Come on, you two. Let's go join the others on the beach." "We will be along in a bit, honey," I replied. Omu stood. "I will assist Serenity at the beach area." The two left my workshop, and we watched them jog down the trail. I noticed that she was not wearing beach shoes and realized that her duties on the island had toughened her. When they arrived at the beach, Serenity went to join Hannah and Sova, while Omu diverted to assist two guests who were just waiting ashore after ditching their personal wave skippers. The android pulled the watercraft up onto the sand where they would be ready for use by other guests. "Dad, if we are needed against the assemblage, are you planning on joining Hannah and me?" Alec said. "Leave it to my son to make me confront something I'd been avoiding for over a year." Alec took my silence as reluctance, or possibly fear. "It's okay if you don't," he said. "It's not that, son," I replied, interrupting him. How to explain? It was hard to articulate my thoughts when I didn't understand them fully myself. "You know I've been in combat before?" I started. I'd told him many times of the battle against the Master AI on Baltra Island. During that attack, I'd almost died when an enemy seeker drone that had gotten inside our screens detonated. I remembered the adrenaline I'd felt during that attack, the confusing mixture of fear and excitement. I recalled the shock and pain when I realized that I'd had my arm blown off. Still, the fear I'd felt had never been for myself. It had been for the Earth and humanity, as any failure then it would have doomed any chances of our planet's future freedom. I still felt the desire for revenge against our enemy, but those feelings had diminished over the 2 centuries since I had learned of the assemblage's role in our destruction. Why did I hesitate now? As before, it wasn't that I feared death. I knew that with my backups and spare shells, I was practically immune from truly dying. If I was to join a physical attack on the enemy, I was sure Naomi would insist that my mind data be freshly recorded. Did I fear a partial loss of uniqueness? I'd never worried about it before. Maybe it was the slim chance that I'd have to take the life of living beings. Though it was unlikely that the enemy Ark vessel was crewed, they may have emergency fast-reviving personnel waiting in suspension. It was logical that if the enemy vessel were to undergo some sort of calamity or attack, these quick-response beings would be revived. If so, could I gun them down in cold blood? I looked at my son sitting next to me, patiently waiting for my reply. He was willing to go. My longtime friend Hannah was also. Why should they have to deal with something I preferred to avoid? "If there is a need for any of us to go, I'll be there with you, son," I said quietly. "If it did come to pass, then I'd just deal with it." Alec just nodded. He was wise enough not to ask me if I was sure. He knew that I'd long considered the matter in depth. "I think your young employee has a problem," Alec said, pointing towards the beach. I looked to where he indicated and saw Cassius standing awkwardly next to the squatting Ambassador Riho. The alien was closely observing 2 of my guests who were lying on a large beach towel in a more secluded area of the beach. The pair of lovers were currently engaged in a round of mutual oral sex. The young male, who was clearly trying to explain what was going on, looked embarrassed and aroused. "Do you suppose he is explaining to the Hemru that the 2 humans are not actually devouring each other?" Alec commented. I snorted. "Maybe he is worried the Hemru will ask him to demonstrate. He's probably aware praying mantis females sometimes eat an occasional careless mating partner." Alec laughed at that. When he recovered, he asked, "How did the 2 hook up anyway? The alien's been here only a short while, right?" Serenity got them together. Riho was curious about all aspects of humanity and wanted a demonstration of our pseudo-reproduction for pleasure, as she called it. Cassius, being a horny young male, seemed the perfect demonstration candidate at the time. Besides, having recently just passed his base maturity tests, his sexual education classes are still fresh in his memory. "I guess that makes sense. The young man would be familiar with first-time sexual experiences from his time in the juvenile dormitories," Alec mused. "Yes, that was the second reason." Serenity explained to the Hemru that Cassius was relatively inexperienced. She also admonished both of them to be patient, careful, and assume nothing, I explained. It seems to have worked out, he commented before looking at me speculatively. I'm surprised that the alien did not ask you to. Are you kidding? I burst out, flustered. Look at that tiny shell. It would have been like… I get it, Alec said, holding his hands up and sparing me the full explanation. It would also have been, creepy knowing you were actually with a true alien. Did you ask Riho how her species reproduced? No, I skipped those details from her virtual forum session, I replied. I neglected to tell Alec that I had not bothered to watch the forum recap yet at all. She did not go over those details in the forum introduction. Maybe one of the girls will bring it up tonight. Hopefully it's not too gross. It would be horrible if the Hemru bred like digger wasps or something even worse, he speculated. I shuddered at the thought. If the aliens did implant their larvae into living hosts only to later eat their way out, ugh! Public perception would be ugly. I made a note to discuss that worry with Omu. Back on the beach, Cassius was leading the ambassador, almost pulling, actually, to where Omu waited with the pair of wave skippers. In the wet sand beyond, Hannah, Sova, and Serenity were playing a game of keep away from Misty. I saw that all 4 humans were happy and laughing. Even the Hemru appeared to have a smile on its face. That put a smile on my own, so I rose, held out my hand to my son, and said, "Come, let's go play with our new family."